derived from the leaves of the coca plant. When cocaine enters the body, it has a strong effect on body functions by acting as an imp on the brain. Large overdose of cocaine causes convulsions, then death. Cocaine causes unusual and often unpredictable feelings and actions. In his ignorance, Marty took that dare, little knowing the eventual horror that lay in the deadly white powder.
Marty, have you seen the painting shears I bought last week? Can't seem to find them anywhere. Marty, you don't seem right. I'm worried about you. There's something wrong. I'm going to take you down to Dr. Peters this afternoon for a checkup.
No, I'm all right.
As his body gradually built up a tolerance, he needed more and more of the drug.
Okay, we're going to kick this off, running a couple of minutes behind, but that's okay. Progress. Okay, I'm so excited. We are live. This is Bridge. K.I.S.S Recovery 101. I'm so excited. This is what I would call a super guest joining us tonight, and virtually. And I definitely want to make sure that I read the post, so guest, you know exactly where we're going with this. And also, just I'm going to give you a rundown of what this show is like. It's about an hour. Sometimes we go over. That's okay. But we try to keep to an hour. And then it's all about recovery. And so being Mother's Day, I thought it'd be fantastic to have a mentor, somebody whose story I've been inspired by, and I thought, and she even offered to attend tonight. I'm having a little bit of fan anxiety right now. So, guest, would you mind just introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Beth, and I am an alcoholic, among other things. Sober since June 26, 1988.
What? Thanks, Beth. Welcome. Okay, so rundown. First 20 minutes or so, we are going to be just talking about bad moms, aka badass moms. Thank you very much. But mom guilt. And that is why one of the groups and support meetings that I go to, it's a safe space for moms to share about those things, because unless you're a parent or have been a parent or in one way or another, it's really hard to escape judgments or feel judged. So, and then I have alarms set that keep me on task. So that first alarm's going to go off, and that's just going to remind us, the whole reason I do this live, Beth, is because I want people to interact. So there's a comment box, and people can feel free to ask questions, give viewpoints, anything that pops in your head, feel free. And then another alarm will go off, and there's this super scary segment called the hot seat, Beth.
Yeah.
That's just 3 hotter, heavier, deeper questions. Now, they're not meant to scare you, but they are definitely meant to be more, deeper for someone listening. Something you might answer or say, they might be thinking, oh, geez, that's me too. And of course, only share what you feel comfortable. And then the last segment is the one that I just love to wrap with, because it's usually positive. It's called Live Facebook Memes. Are you familiar with memes, Beth?
Yes.
Okay, those are my jam. And I definitely through the week will screenshot my favorite ones, or people send to me or whatever. And I'm going to flash them to you live, Beth. And we get to look at them. I get to get your viewpoint on these memes. So, live. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready, but gosh, I never have an opinion on anything, Bridge. I'm just, kind of meek and try to get along with all people all the time.
Oh, right. Yes, those opinions. What do they say? The opinions are like a-holes or something?
Yeah, everybody's got one.
Yep. Okay, so bad moms. So this episode is an unrealistic idea of, in quotes, good moms creates a premeditated expectations followed by overwhelming, sometimes painful resentments. Constantly worrying about getting everything right can trigger feelings of guilt, stress, depression, and rage. It's easy to understand why the highly promoted, socially acceptable reward is that glass of wine turns into a dark and lonely world of addiction. Reframing the perception of expectations of parent roles and finding connection in recovery is the light at the end of the tunnel. And we could discuss how to take that first step. Step. There's a few steps there, right?
Right.
So Beth, I'm just gonna start unloading some questions because you are a person. So I've heard you speak in person, which was such an honor. I've read your story, as I'm sure many have, and one thing that I immediately connected with in your story, just the title alone, "Empty on the Inside," it was like glaring at me when I first read through it because I couldn't even put into words that empty, dark space inside myself. And I'm just going to read a little bit, but this one key paragraph really, really just like was that awareness, the slap in the face. It says, "But I couldn't tell people that. They might think I was a bad mom. And I was a bad mom. I was a terrible mom. No, I didn't beat them. And of course, I told them that I loved them. But the message my kids got from me was, yes, I love you. Now go away. They had to be practically invisible in their own home. I had absolutely nothing to give them emotionally. All they wanted was my love and attention, and alcoholism robbed me of the ability to give it. I was empty on the inside." Oh, God, it still makes me emotional. It gives me goosebumps. And that was me. For 17 years, I felt emotionally dead, and I didn't even realize it. And I had 17 years that I struggled in and out of the rooms, and, I was in such denial because I was going, I was following social acceptable, like, perfect mom roles. I made sure they ate at night. I made sure they got their homework done. I got them to all the activities, but I really wasn't present. Like, I really wasn't there, and they knew that. Like, they felt it. I describe it like just a ghost. I was going through the motions, but I wasn't really there. And so Beth, I'm going to stop talking. I'm a rambler, so don't mind me. But, when you got this opportunity to share your story, what prompted you to do that? And how were you able, how long did it take you to just sit down and put it into words?
Oh gosh. Well, it really came about because it was kind of a perfect storm of events. My teenage son was starting to exhibit, some of the membership requirements for us, and so we were having suicide attempts and just other stuff. But really, I have to do a little family history. My father got sober when I was 7. He had one brother, and my uncle Leo, and he died probably 10 years ago with 40 something years of sobriety. I was the only child of an only child. So, on my side, dad's alcoholic, dad's sober, and then there's me. Mom's side of the family's all just kind of depressingly normal. So she married dad. So, I did used to point out every now and then, you did marry dad. So there's like something's off in there somewhere. Because really, like, kind of normal people don't really stick with us because we frighten them or we make them tired. But then my dad's brother, had decades of sobriety. He had 2 children. One of them, my cousin, she got sober 11 months after I did. So that's just immediate family, right? And then my grandfather probably should have been in AA, and that whole side of the family, they emigrated. They started in Ireland centuries ago, and then we're in Australia. And so my grandfather came to America at 17 years old with his whole family from Australia. So my dad was first generation American here, but we kind of always jokingly suspect that the family ended up in Australia as part of the whole debtor's prison thing from Ireland. So, we're pretty sure that the alcoholism goes way back. So, now I'm sober and my kids are getting a little older, and I'm thinking that I really should just write down some family history so that when my granddaughter or her granddaughter needs to be in AA, they'll have some kind of reference that, you're not the first one in this family. And so I was already thinking of writing down, some kind of family history for them. And about then, they had made the decision to come out with the 4th edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, because every few decades they swap out some of the stories, because the purpose of the stories, and it says right in the book, people miss this sometimes, but the actual purpose of the stories is to show how people establish their relationship with God and then, recovered as a result. And so they update them so that, because if they were all just still from 1935, people would go, oh, I can't relate, and close the book. And when the book first came out, there weren't a lot of women and all of that, so they have the historical section, but then they have, some of the newer stories. So anyway, they had put out a call for people to send in their stories. And that was about the time I was thinking of writing it down so my kids would have it. So it just kind of gave me an excuse and a framework. So truly, I did it just to have some history for my kids to look back on down the road. Never dreamed that they would put it in the book. And it's a very long process. I mean, people don't realize I sent that story in 1997. So I was 9 years sober, and the book came out in 2001. So it was, it was 4 or 5 years later when that happened. I had actually kind of forgotten about it, and until there was an update in 2000 at the Minneapolis convention, there was an update on it saying that they had painstakingly handwritten letters to everyone whose story they didn't take, and they had winnowed it down to, I think, 38 stories from the original 1,200 and some odd stories that they received. And I just went, I didn't get a letter. So, but our mailman at the time was pretty sure he needed to be in a meeting somewhere. We got the neighbors' mail, they got our mail. We got stuff 3 weeks later. So we just kind of figured, well, my letter probably got delivered to the neighbors, 6 months ago. So yeah, I didn't really worried about it. And then my sponsor knew someone who had just gotten a letter. So we kind of put together that he had made that cut down to 38, but then not the cut to 24. So when I still didn't have a letter, I finally wrote to the literature committee at General Service Office and just said, look, I don't know if you can even tell me this, but here's the deal. I sent it. I've never gotten a letter. Our mailman delivers our mail all over town, so who knows? And I got a response back from Lois Fisher, who worked. She was a longtime staff member at GSO, and she said, well, we haven't sent you. You haven't gotten a letter because we haven't sent it yet. So at that point, then we were kind of freaked out because, you don't know what it's going to do to your life, right? And you don't really want to go tell people, oh, my God, I think my story's going to be in the book. They're like, yeah, sure, Beth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We just kind of kept it to ourselves. So that all happened in, the summer of 2000. And then they, at the end of 2000, right after the international, is when the 4th edition committee combined with the literature committee, and they winnowed it down from 38 to 24. So it's a really long, it's interesting process, but it wasn't one of those like, oh, I think I'll send in my story and see if they'll put it in the book. That was just the farthest thing from my mind, because it's crazy to think, they would pick your story out of however many they get. It just kind of worked out that way. But I I truly had forgotten I sent it until we saw the update, at International about, they had cut it down to 38 stories and sent letters to everybody. And that's when I talked to my sponsor and said, I didn't get a letter. So, and we were
Wow.
kind of wondering for a while, and
That's
we
so
still don't
crazy.
talk about it much just because it's that the purpose of the book is to tell how each person established their relationship with God to help others find their way to God and to sobriety. And so I have a few friends I've met over the year. I mean, a book came out in 2001, so it's been out more than 20 years now. And so I have over the years met several other people, and most of us feel that, we don't go out and speak about it or promote it or talk about it because that would kind of turn into elevating the messenger above the message.
Right.
And, being one of many is what all of our lives depend on. So we try to not, elevate above the message itself.
Right. Well, and
See, I'm a
definitely.
rambler too. It could be a
And I
long
love it.
night.
Seriously, you could ramble the whole show. My listeners are kind of sick of my voice sometimes. But no, I think that's so phenomenal, and your story, your message just I feel like touched so many moms, and I
Mhm.
definitely needed your story to finally feel, because I have been in AA at the 12 steps since I was 21. So if you do the math, that's 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was hard to connect, and I didn't even know there was different editions. So that's what's so funny is, I didn't really catch that it was the fourth edition and then your story. And I just remember we were in a meeting, and I don't know why, and of course I've been into plenty of meetings where I wasn't clear headed. So,
Right.
but it hit me like a ton of bricks in such a great way. And so that took a long time to even get out there. Did you let your kids read the story before? Or did you wait till it came out in the book and then what they think of it?
Well, I waited until it was coming out because, again, and they were, I mean, when I wrote it, 1997, they would have been, let's see, Robbie's born in 82, Sarah's born in 84. So they would have been like 13 and 15 when I sent it in. Um, and so they were, and, they pretty much grew up. They were 4 and 6 when I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
So they grew up in meetings. They I just when I got sober, I just dove all the way in. So our social life, pretty much everything we did was based around recovery. So they had grown up in that, and so it's funny. My son's reaction when the draft came, because it came in like November of '01. It's funny, we were taping, Chuck and I used to tape AA conventions and in Cincinnati. And so we were taping a local one, and our daughter was out there helping us. She was probably 16, and Chuck didn't feel well. So he had gone on to bed. He had a super high fever. Turned out he had pneumonia. And so I bring Sarah back to the house, and it's midnight, and we're tired and grumpy. And then when we get home, and here's the mail and this draft of the book, right? So
Wow.
because they don't tell you, they title the stories. I mean, they edit, they title them. So we had no idea which story it was or anything. So
Wow.
we're reading down, trying to figure out which one it is. As Sarah said, we should have known when it said she thought she knew it all. That should have been a clue. Um, and so now it's like midnight, and I've got this thing. Well, nobody knows it's coming except, the only people we talk to is our family and our sponsors and a couple of friends. And that was it. Probably the circle of people who knew was less than 20 people. And that's
Mm.
counting Chuck and his sponsor and everything. So now I look, and it's, of course, it's way, as I say, way in the back with the losers, right? It's under. So I called my friend Penny, and I said, Penny, the draft came, and they have me in the back with they lost nearly all. And she didn't miss a beat. She goes, Beth, have you heard your story? So I guess she was not surprised it was under They Lost Nearly All.
Mm.
But the kid, when my son read it, he got a really funny look on his face, and he just looked up and he said, "I'm in the big book."
Oh.
And I hadn't really thought about it like that. And of course, now we go, "Yes, you are," you know. But at the time, he was like, it didn't even occur to me or Chuck or anybody. It's like, yep, you are in the book. It is talking about you. So
Wow.
they, overall they're proud. They, and it's not. I mean, they grew up in our house, so they don't go running around telling everybody, "Hey, by the way, guess what my mom did?" Especially because our son's a lot more like I was. He spends a lot of time and energy trying to stay out of Alcoholics Anonymous. So he's not going to go like broadcast the fact that, mom is air quote famous in AA. He just, as it is, he can't go anywhere. Sarah jokes all the time she can't take us anywhere because we run into somebody we know, between taping and speaking and when she graduated from basic training, she joined the military after high school, and we were at her basic training graduation in South Carolina, and we came walking out, and this lady's looking at me, and I'm kind of looking at her. Now, by now, I'm we're living in North Carolina, and here's this woman who's from Chicago that heard me speak in St. Louis, right? Because we just keep running into each other everywhere. And every now and then I was in a bookstore with my mom, and we were in line, and I said something to mom, and this woman 2 people ahead of us just jerked around, like her head just spun around when you hear somebody. And then she saw me, and you could just see kind of this range of emotions going across her face. Like, wait, I know her, but I don't know her. So I said, "Friend of Bill," and she was like, "Uh-huh."
Uh-huh.
CD, and she went, "Uh-huh." That's it. So apparently my voice is more famous than I am now. So every now and then I was in Atlanta at the International walking by talking to a friend, and some kid jumps up off the retaining wall. I was like, "Oh my God, that's Beth H. I know that voice anywhere." So
Oh,
for,
cool.
for good, bad, or indifferent, it's a recognizable voice.
Definitely. And okay, I love that. Just Are You a Friend of Bill? That's like my favorite go-to. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, you could tell by somebody if they're really living this program and they're doing the steps, just how they speak. A lot of times I can tell, but I don't want to call
Right.
them out, So, are you a friend of Bill? And that's the best way to just, openly put it out there if they want to.
Right.
Okay, we
Right,
got a
and we do
question.
have that kind of mental twist too that you hear. When we moved to North Carolina, we went.
we got a
We do
question.
have that kind of mental twist too that you hear. When we moved to North Carolina.
Oh, you got a echo there. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah, how did that happen?
When we moved to North Technology. Got a echo there. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Technology.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Oh, great. Okay, let me try something. Okay, yeah, it's definitely on your end. So I'm going to unmute you in a sec here. But look, I got a comment. Sarah W. wants to know. I think we kind of answered this. Did you submit your story as a means to just put it out there or as an insurance policy for your sobriety? Here, I'll flip that question. Because I think you expressed that you put it out there, just kind of, that wasn't really your main point. Your main point was you wanted to have something for your kiddos to be able to backtrack to. So I wonder about that pressure, like now that it's out there, your story, is there this added heaviness to like, well, now I'm being held accountable to millions of people.
Hey Sky, I'm like hearing everything 3 times. It's all bouncing back.
Do you want to go back out and come back in?
I'm like hearing 3 times. It's all bouncing.
Let's try that. Do you want to go back out and come back in?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Let me try that.
Let's try that. Do you want to go back? Okay, so I'll just let you. Okay, so Beth is gonna just exit out and then come back in. You should still be able to use the same link, but just to be safe, I'm going to send you another link via email. Fresh link. Okay. Hopefully this isn't messing up the live feed. Okay, so listeners, if you're listening, I have Beth H. Her story is known to millions. There's a big book. It's literally blue and big. A lot of people know about it. If you go in the back of the book of the 4th edition, there's this beautiful story that changed my life called Empty on the Inside. And this is her story. This is the person. So it's pretty amazing. Okay, here comes the email. And hopefully that works. So one thing that I'm going to... Oh, okay. Let's see if this works. Beth, can you hear me? It might take some time. Oh, added you to the stream. That probably helps. Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
And no
you
echo.
only hear one of me?
Yes.
That was weird. That's
Technology.
welcome to the voices in my head. That's what they sound like.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm glad you picked one. So
Yeah.
did you hear that question from a listener? I flipped it and asked, is there like an extra heavy accountability factor knowing that your story, she asked if it's like as an insurance policy for your sobriety, your story being in there.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I mean, yes and no. I like to think I would, be who I am anyway, but it probably is a little extra incentive on days, that there's an old joke about I must hurry and catch up with the others, for I am their leader. But it's, I mean, I think we all carry a responsibility to be an example. The walk and the talk have to line up, and if it doesn't, we're the ones that suffer eventually. Mm-hmm. So I don't really think of it in terms of responsibility. Believe it or not, a lot of times I don't really think about it at all. We just forget about it, which is kind of nice, because when it first happened, we had no idea what life was going to look. You're never really sure what something like that's going to do in your life, but it has, I'm kind of glad just ego-wise, I'm glad I was already speaking some at conventions, so I don't get that, well, they're only asking you because your story's in the book thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's, but I think, being visible, there's always a more of a responsibility when we are visible to be sure that we're walking the talk, because like it or not, other people do, rely on us to, even though it's no human power, we all have our heroes. We all have our people that we want to follow. My sponsor is one who, I want what she has. I do what she does. Peg Martin from Bellevue, Nebraska is my sponsor since 1995. And, when I asked her to sponsor me, it's because at the time she was 30 years sober. She still had a job at her home group. Her job that year at her home group was table wiper. It wasn't like, oh, sorry, I'm Peg M. I'm much too important to do these little menial jobs now. She just really is a walking example of what being one of many looks like. And ultimately, all of our lives depend on being one of many. I can't, one of the most powerful things I ever heard was a girl said, when my life depends on being one of many, it's very hard to feel like one of many in a room when I have an opinion on everyone in the room.
Wow.
And so, I try to keep that in mind and live by that, because my brain will go there too. Like, you guys probably don't have this in Minnesota, but periodically down here, there might be one or two people who always talk at 5 till, or,
Yes. Oh, yes.
always get the last word, or, oh, goody, they're telling that story again. And when I hear my brain doing that, I just try to stop and say a quick prayer to let me hear, God's message in it, because I can't afford to be, forming an opinion on everybody in the room any more than anyone else can.
Absolutely. Well, and I find too that I just love that you said that, because for me, definitely you would be one of those people, but my heroes, those people, and so that I look up to, and I want what they want, right? And
Right.
so I think when, a sister or a brother in the program goes back out, it's not this judgment that I feel. It's like this overwhelming sadness, for them, but for me personally, it's like I know that they're human, but a part
Right.
of me feels like, wow. I remember early on, I'd feel like, well, if they can't do it, how am I going to be able to do it? you know.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip of the coin, now that I'm the one sponsoring or mentoring, in my mind, it's a different kind of sadness. It's more like, we only have each day 24 hours, right? And I think it's so powerful being in recovery. We make that choice every day to keep this recovery thing going. And it's a lot of work some days, more days than others. And so that gives me pride. And so when someone goes back out, it's almost like it makes me feel almost, this is going to sound weird, Beth. I'm just putting this out. I'm speaking. I'm just not thinking, I'm just speaking, but
Mm-hmm.
it makes me feel like more alone, because as
Right.
I'm getting more as a leader, not like a leader, but more
Mm-hmm.
mentoring, and I'm doing
Sure.
all the things and the tools, I feel like it makes me feel like, I mean, I don't like to say that because I felt like an outcast for my whole life,
I know what
before.
you mean.
Do you know what?
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Because, yeah, like, what would you say? So, like, I've had dreams. I've had not a lot, but I remember having a specific dream where I went back out. And what
Mm-hmm.
stood out in the dream when I woke up was one of my spotties at the time found out and made a point to tell everybody. And in my
Mm-hmm.
dream, I felt this overwhelming, like I let myself down, and oh my gosh, I was scared that all my spotties were gonna reuse.
Right.
It's
Right.
like this pressure that I put on myself that it's not needed. Like, I am human, but again, like how
Mm-hmm.
I feel. So what would you say to that? Like, when you said
Right.
you
Well, one of the
understand?
interesting things I noticed was because, I think we all still have the occasional drunk dream, but early on, I noticed that even in my dream, I was, my reaction in my dream was maybe nobody will know. And then in my
Mm-hmm.
dream, at the end of my dream, it's like, no, you have to tell people. Like,
Yeah.
so AA was even invading my dreams. Like, if you drink, you have to go tell someone that you drank. Not that there was ever any doubt when I was drinking, but it's and it's I think when people close to us drink, there's fear. There is anger, but the thing that we tend to forget is, and this is what I tell the women I sponsor all the time, anger is fear's bodyguard.
Yeah.
So when I'm angry, my question to myself needs to be not why am I angry, but what am I afraid of?
Mm.
What's the fear? And that fear underneath when somebody drinks is it could happen to us, and there's also all kinds of misinformation out there. I was talking about this in a meeting the other day that I used to. I'll probably step on some toes here, but oh well, here goes. Um, that sometimes you'll be in a meeting and some old timer might go, well, I might drink tomorrow, never know. And I just think, well, way to give the newcomer hope, bucko. I mean,
Right.
it's like if you're 20 years sober and you don't know if you're going to drink tomorrow, maybe you might want to look at that. And I know they're just trying to be clever and cliche, but there's a lot of clever cliche stuff out there in meetings that's killing people. And,
Mm.
the bottom line is, and this part's my opinion, as I always joke, but I'm right, um, that once you're past a few weeks, nobody gets struck drunk. It doesn't come out of nowhere. The thought might come out of nowhere periodically, But, God's help comes in the form of interruption. That's my observation over decades, because I'm a people watcher and I'm a God watcher. And God's help will come in the form of interruption. So I sponsored a girl who had about 4 months, and she had never been sober that long. I mean, that was a miracle. And so she drank, and she was really mad at God. She had been in the grocery store and had this thought to drink, and she was almost to the line, checking out, but she had this thought to drink. And she said, "Oh God, I don't want to drink, please help me." And then she got out of line and went and, got the bottle of vodka and got back in line. And she's saying, "God, I don't want to drink. Please help me." So now she's telling me about it, and she's furious because so it's God's fault, right? That she drank. And I said, "Well, tell me, did you go to the express lane?" And well, of course she did, right? And I said, "How many people ahead of you were writing checks in the express line?" And she sat there a minute, and you could just see this dawn of recognition go across her face, that it had taken her almost 20 minutes to get through that line to buy that bottle. That God had given her 20 minutes that she could have just walked off and left the cart there. And we don't recognize that. And I really saw it, believe it or not, on a food thing first. Chuck and I were on some diet, and I'm driving through town mad one day because I'm probably, who knows what, 3 days with no sugar, and you'd hate everybody too, how that goes. And so out of nowhere, this voice in my head goes, "Well, screw it, you can't eat, you may as well drink." And I was 5 years sober. But the difference was when that thought came, I just started laughing. I thought, well, that's stupid, and so when that kind of thought comes, I don't panic and batten down the hatches to see what's wrong. It just lets me know that I am still alcoholic. And still periodically in an unguarded moment, my brain is going to go, "Oh, wow, this would probably work again," but we get this help. So, this one particular day I'm talking about, I want to eat right. Well, then I decide now I'm going to Arby's, on lunch. So I go to Arby's. Well, they're lined up out into the street. So I go, okay, fine. I'll go on down around the corner and I'll go to Wendy's. And so I get in the Wendy's line. There's only one car ahead of me, right? Awesome. Now this is in the early 1990s, but they had the menu up where you could see who, what they ordered ahead of you. So this one car ahead of me, I look and their total order is like $35. So clearly he's ordering for his entire construction crew. Now I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, so I wheel out of there. Fine, I'll go to Burger King. Well, that would have meant turning left out of Wendy's across 4 lanes of traffic and then going, 10 feet and turning left across 4 more lanes to get into Burger. And all of a sudden I realized that, I did ask God for some help this morning, right? And I just started laughing. And that was my first big epiphany that God's help comes through interruption and inconvenience sometimes, that it doesn't always come in the form that we're looking for, but it's always there. And, so now back to these old timers who go, "Oh, I may get drunk tomorrow. Who knows?" I don't find that particularly helpful for a newcomer. If I was new and heard someone say that, I'd be like, what are you even still doing here? What am I doing here? If I'm not going to know in 20 years if I'm going to drink tomorrow, why would I do this for 20 years, right? And then I get equally cringy if I hear someone go, "I don't see myself ever drinking again." That worries me a little. But where the middle ground is, if I continue doing what I'm doing, I don't see myself drinking again, right? If I quit doing AA, I absolutely see myself drinking again. It won't be next week or even I could probably hang in there for a while, but eventually, because this spiritual process with these steps, they can be unworked. One of the more powerful talks I heard in my first year or two of sobriety was a guy who drank after a couple of years. He was supposed to get married. He and this girl were like Mr. and Mrs. AA, and they were getting married. I got sober in June. They're getting married in February. And he broke off the wedding 2 weeks before the wedding, and then he drank. And the whole AA community is just shocked. And So it took him about a year and a half to get back. He almost died. I mean, it was bad.
Mm.
And when he came back, he said he realized it's like he had unworked the steps in reverse order, that he quit working with newcomers, right? Step 12. And his prayer life started to suffer. And he wasn't really taking any kind of daily inventory or anything. And he wasn't, he didn't really need to make amends because, well, he's never wrong, right? And now he's already back down to step 3, just that fast. And he said by the time he realized the spiritual trouble he was in, he had too much motion behind him and he couldn't get the brakes on. So, if I start getting that unfitness, it's not so much what am I doing wrong as, what am I not doing? What has changed here? And, sometimes, the world is full of mood altering people and we're not, as I said, one of my favorite sayings that I heard early on is if you like everybody, you're not going to enough meetings, right? Because we're just not going to like everybody. But this, this idea that, I don't know if I'm going to drink tomorrow. That does not, to me, match up with what the book says we can have if we walk this path with God.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's very negative. I mean, my perception of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it makes me feel, it would make me feel hopeless. Like
Right.
it could happen that quick, because I know it can happen that quick. And you're at how many years, and you're still saying it could happen that quick for you? Like, yeah, like you said, I agree, because I do the work every day as much as
Right.
possible. I pull something from recovery every day. It
Right.
keeps me feeling, somewhat balanced. Now,
Yeah.
this is
And
great.
the book says nothing will so much ensure permanent sobriety. I forget the exact quote, but as intensive work with other alcoholics. So it says throughout the book that we can have this permanence and this constant and this, there are a lot of promises in the book past, like the promises that they read
Right.
at meetings. There are, if you're new out there and you want to amuse yourself, we'll get a pink highlighter because pink's a happy color, and get a new big book and just go through and highlight everywhere you see a promise. And you will be amazed at the number of promises in that book.
Absolutely. And I think the key, 17 years, it's interesting because I was the person who had all the reasons and the excuses that the 12 steps didn't work for me. I've heard them all, and the key for me was, I know for myself, until I went through all the steps and really, step 12 really started working with others. Another speaker shared that she changed the word to working to loving with others. That is when I became like I live and love in the steps. That's when it
Right.
all clicks. But until I did that, it didn't really stick or resonate. And now it is that life program, but it took a long time. And I have a question for you, a listener. She's got a great question actually on what you were just talking about. She said, have you ever spent time away from the rooms for any reason? Hurt, anger, boredom? So I would chime off of that too. Like, I know for myself, I do get complacent quite quickly. And so have you ever had to take just some space or time away from AA or the meetings, and if so, what did you
No,
do?
I really, there's an old saying that people who don't go to meetings don't see what happens to people who don't go to meetings. And for whatever, and I kind of have my comfort. Now, when I was new, I went to 12, 14 meetings a week because I could. I was unemployable. I had a lot of free time. But I've just found that I feel better when I go to more meetings, right? And my comfort zone is 4. And I have, like I said, I've always been a people watcher. So I watch what happens to people who, a lot of times somebody will say, I need to find balance. I need to find some balance in my life. And generally that is code for I'm going to cut meetings, watch me. Right. And what happens is, and I saw there's been 2 times in my life that I was under 4 meetings a week. One of them was when Chuck was very, very sick in 2012, and he had to he's retiring medically from work, and there just was a lot going, and I'm working full time, and I was a tax accountant, and the other time was when I was finishing up grad school in '06. But because I had seen it happen in others, I saw it as it was happening. What happens when we cut meetings, and I can pretty much use this generic we with confidence. We cut meetings because we need more time for all this other stuff. And when we cut meetings, we don't have time to do any, if I am down at 2 meetings a week, which has only happened 2 times in 34 years,
Wow.
when I'm cutting meetings like that, who's got time? I mean, because it's not just an hour. You got to get to the meeting, and you got to get home, and there's the meeting before the meeting, and there's the meeting after the meeting. And so that 1 hour meeting, it's really 3 or 4 hours, and I got shit to do, right? And I have found over and over and over that if I don't have time to do everything, and this is counterintuitive, but this is the way of the world of the spirit. If I don't have time to do everything, if I will add 2 meetings a week, I have time to do everything. And it's because, one of my early AA heroes just kind of offhandedly one day in this big book meeting where I got sober, he said, I really think that God gave us AA to just keep us busy and out of his way, right? So he can run our lives. And it's closer to the truth than we might think. It's like, imagine trying to cook dinner with a toddler. What do? You give them a coloring book and sit them in a corner to color so they're busy and out of your way so you can do what needs to be done. And so God kind of gave us AA to keep it. And the more AA I do, the more time I have to do everything else. If
I love that.
if I am pressed for time, I can look and a meeting will have fallen off somewhere. So for the most part, and I have been doing this for decades, every Sunday I look at my upcoming week and I go, here's where I'm going to meetings this week. And I will always pick at least 5 so that if I miss one, I'm still at 4. Now right now we have the Busters meeting, which is 8 a.m. and we love it. I'm at Busters probably 4 or 5 days a week. And then my home group is a big book meeting that's Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock. So, and then there's another weekend meeting we like sometimes, or, Chuck and I are, we speak a lot. So we're at a lot of conventions, or we still make it a point to travel to 2 or 3 conventions a year where we're not speaking so that we can just go be 2 of many in the, in the crowd, that we're not, because we have some friends who have, kind of got to where they only go when they're speaking, and the ego. Harry Tebow said, never underestimate the power of the ego to regenerate itself. And so we are intentional about being 2 of many in the crowd because
Absolutely.
it's important.
Well, and that's why when you came here to Minnesota to speak, and I also like to just hit meetings, especially when I'm in different spots. So I went to the meeting before you were going to speak, and I saw you, and I was like, oh my gosh, is that her? That's really her. I think that's her. And of course, you were right. As soon as you started speaking, I'm like, that is her. And I just thought, how cool. Like, I'm sorry, but you are who you are. And I just thought, yep, she is definitely she's one of us. I love her more.
Right. And, Chuck and I, and it's that way with our marriage too. We kind of joke. They say, if you want to be an old timer, don't drink and don't die. And then if you want to be an old timer doing traditional relationship workshops, don't drink, don't die, and don't divorce. But we met in AA, and we celebrated 30 years of marriage last July. So we are in fact doing traditional relationship workshops quite a bit. But what we realized as we started to put those together is that we are the same people, whether we're out with 150 other people at a convention, or whether we are home alone, or whether we have 1 or 2 people at the house. There was a guy he sponsored who had been kind of missing in action for a while, and he was back, and I know what his home life looked like because I sponsored his wife, and Chuck sponsored him, and they both like to get the last word a lot. And
Oh, sure.
so he comes over to the house, and we're doing whatever we were doing before and then we all, the three of us get in the car to go to the meeting, and he's in the back seat, and he leans forward, and you can tell he just can't take it anymore. He goes, I just have to ask, are you guys this nice to each other all the time? And we were like, why wouldn't we be? Why would we not be nicer to each other than we are to anybody else? We see each other more, and we are, our goal, the way we live our life, is that we are the same people. If you see us at the grocery store and a meeting and church and in our living room, all four of those Chuck and Beth sightings, you're going to see the same people.
Yeah.
And that's a gift from sobriety, because I don't know about you, but I used to have to, it's hard work remembering who you told what to, right?
Oh, yeah.
Trying who's like what Keith Drum, he was a speaker when I was new, and he said that, they used to tell us in high school or junior high, be yourself, and he goes, I would just think, which one? Which one? Who am I Keith the biker today? Am I Keith the banker today? Am I, so, one of the gifts I think that sobriety has brought is that ultimately, my identity is child of God. That is my highest credential. I used to joke about I needed a little ID card, like the CIA have their badges, right? I had just had this little badge of, Beth Hartley, child of God, Beth Hartley, child of God. And I was speaking in Akron. And after the meeting, this guy brought me this little little leather thing with that little badge in it, and it says Beth H, child of God. So I finally got my credentials.
Oh, I love it. Well, yes, and just criminals. That's how they're caught. Is they can't. People cannot remember their lies, and I just remember when I finally let go, when I finally surrendered, and I finally just decided, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to hold back. A-hole bridge had to come out for a while. I just stopped people pleasing, and I just focused on being honest with myself.
Right.
And when that came, forth, it was like it was this freedom. I live in the freedom because I don't have to, like, what I say in every day and every moment is my truth.
Right.
And I don't have to remember or explain or defend that because that's just me.
Yeah, and it's not even our truth, it's just the truth. Truth is truth.
Yes. Okay, are you ready? We're going to hit into, see if you can hear this sound.
Yeah.
Does it sound like fire?
Lightning round, huh?
It's the fire. It's the hot seat, Beth.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. 3 hot and heavy questions. Now, you actually already kind of naturally already answered one, but I'm just going to throw them at you, and you can reiterate if you want to. Okay, Beth. Hot seat question number 1. You ready?
Yes.
What's the most hurtful thing someone has ever said to you?
I had a woman I sponsor who decided to, I'm putting air quotes around fire because we don't hire and fire people, but when she made the decision to change sponsors, she kind of took my inventory in the process, via email, and said, well, I just wanted to be sure I wasn't off track here. So I checked with several other people, and here's what they all said. So like for 3 weeks after that, I didn't want to go to a meeting because I didn't know who said what. And, it just was it was unnecessary. And it was hurtful. None of us like to think that people are talking about us.
Yeah.
So to just go, I wanted to be sure I wasn't off base. So I talked to a whole bunch of other people, and here's what they all said about you. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, just like trying to get like a gang of people. Well, here's what I find though. When people come at me trying to talk about other people, my immediate thought is, okay, what's up with you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and ultimately, if they'll do it for you, they'll do it to you.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. Cheating spouses and gossips. Same principle. If they'll do it for you, they'll do it to you.
Oh, yes. Oh, nailed it. Okay, that is a great answer. And I could definitely ramble on about that. I think for me, it's so hurtful because I gave them my best, my time, my energy, because I love and support and care for them. And it's hurtful because I feel like it's like a stab in the heart, in the back, the heart,
Right.
because it's like all this stuff they could have just said to me instead of running around and getting a bunch of people like on their
Right.
side when we could have just had a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, question number 2. In the rooms of recovery or meetings, what is something that you hear or have heard said that makes you frustrated or angry? Now, you kind of already answered that, but is there anything
Yeah.
else?
Where to
Anything else?
begin?
Yeah, that you just see red like, oh, I can't believe they just said that. Now I got to say something.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean that's a big one. Uh, it's all the same disease, that kind of stuff. It's we could do a whole nother hour on singleness of purpose, which I'm happy to do sometime. I'm really good at it. Um, because I thought that was just like picky bullcrap when I got sober. But again, being a people watcher all these years, I've seen what it does.
Mm,
And we are, bottom short answer, we're killing drug addicts thinking that we can help them,
mm,
and they're coming out of institutions being told to start this way of rigorous honesty by lying. Just substitute alcohol for whatever you did when you share. So good luck on this rigorous, honest way of life, and just lie. Nobody will notice, right? So,
mm.
so that's a big one. But the pet peeve one is I might drink tomorrow. Who knows? But there's so much built around that. I did a whole weekend retreat once with the girls I sponsor on stuff that you hear at meetings that is not AA. So there's a
Ah,
lot. And
yes.
ultimately we have the responsibility to be carrying the message, not our message, right?
Yeah.
It's most of what's, again, air quote, wrong in Alcoholics Anonymous can only be fixed through sponsorship from the bottom up. There is
Mm,
there's nothing that can be fixed from the top down.
right.
There was about a 15 or 20-year gap in sponsorship that happened in the mid 80s and early 90s when everybody got super polite and didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and
Mhm.
and they started letting people take meetings hostage, and all kinds of topics that had nothing to do with alcoholism. And it's just, it's a process and it can be reversed, but it's, sometimes you have to be a little unpopular. My sponsor says that heads that rise above the crowds make easy targets. It doesn't mean that we don't rise.
I love that. Okay, fantastic. And last question, question number 3, Beth. If you could, now this is kind of a hard one, but if you could magically erase one specific memory from your kid's life, and here's why it's magic, nothing changes presently. Like nothing in your life, it doesn't do the butterfly effect. Everything will be exactly as it is today. But if there's one memory that stands out that you could just erase, poof, from your kids like seeing or remembering or whatever, does anything come to mind?
Yeah, probably the Christmas before I got sober. Just that whole Christmas season, trying to, my mom told me later, because I was living with a friend in her attic, and the kids were living with mom, and so they were supposed to come pick me up for their little school Christmas pageant, and so I'm sitting up at the bar just agonizing over what's going to be worse, if they come get me and I've been drinking, or if they come to get me and I'm not there. And so I had that
Mm.
argument with myself for 2 or 3 hours throughout the afternoon. And I finally decided, okay, I should be there. And so I ran home, and put on a clean shirt and brushed my teeth and looked in the mirror, and I was doing, okay, we'll be fine. And my mom told me later that when I came walking out the door to get in the car, my 6-year-old son said, "Oh no."
Oh.
And that's the illustration I use a lot when people say, "What does powerless look like?" Because I mean, we joke about being bad moms, and we joke because I mean, it's a lot of times story points are made through humor. We just remember them more, but ultimately, I never would have done that to them on purpose.
Right. Absolutely.
That's when the real powerlessness sets in. And not wanting my children will never be a proud moment in my life, but I have a responsibility to carry that message to other women who have everywhere I've ever spoken, someone has come up to me and said, I didn't want my kids either, and I've never told anyone. And
Right.
I can give them a hug and tell them, go tell your sponsor, and then be prepared because someone will need to hear it from you, because
Yeah.
I don't ever want there to be a woman in a meeting where I have spoken that leaves there thinking, I don't belong here either. I'm too dirty. I'm too bad to be with these women. They're all clean and they're perfect and they're sober and I'll never be them.
Right.
They need to know that we started where they started, and it's only because of the power of God and a willingness to, learn to subjugate our ego one day at a time to His
Hmm.
will, that we can become these children of God that we were always meant to be.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was it. That was the hot seat. That was beautiful. And I think I just had an aha moment because I know for myself, and it's specifically with, my home group and just like women meetings in particular, that's when I really share some of my dark shit. But
Hmm.
I try not to be that dreary doom person, but it takes just that one woman to come up and say, I'm so glad that you said that. I didn't realize that happened to other people too. And like,
Right,
and I just never thought that I would be on the other end of it. But I remember also hearing other stories and they shared, shame stories that they felt shameful of. And it
right.
just made me feel, okay, so maybe I'm not alone. I'm not the only one.
Yeah, because I mean, when I got to a meeting, my first day out of detox, and I didn't like get out of detox on day one and stay sober happily ever after. I had 5 years of doing what I call drive-by AA. I just go to treatment to stay out of jail, and
Hmm.
then drink for a year, and then go to treatment to stay out of jail. But so I get to 405 Oak Street in Cincinnati, which is where the meeting was when I got out of detox that first night, and the woman speaking told a whole room full of people that alcoholism had taken her to a place where she didn't want to take care of her daughter. She only wanted to drink. And so now she's telling 150 people my biggest secret, right? And she doesn't even know
Yeah.
me. And she has just told this huge secret. And meanwhile, this other woman, Diane, I mean, my God, come on. Her purse and her belt matched, right? Like I didn't even carry a purse. And her nails were done and her hair was clean and her purse and her shoes matched and just all of this eye rolling, whatever. You did not drink where I drank, honey pie. And then I heard her, and yeah, she did. She sure did.
Mm.
She not only drank where I drank, she got pregnant on purpose so the president of the motorcycle club would have to marry her, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
sitting up there, she looks beautiful. And I think there's no way she could have been where I was. So, fast forward, I'm around 2 years sober and I speak at 405 Oak Street on a Friday night. And the people are coming up thanking the speaker. And this girl who's about a year behind me, because she just celebrated 34 years like last week. And so she was about a year behind me. And she came up to shake my hand and she had the most confused, perplexed look on her face. And she goes, Damn, Beth, you are alcoholic. And I realized that and I love these little like epiphanies we get from God. I love a dear, dear friend of mine is the one who said, Grace is the moment when we see everything exactly as it is. And
Mm.
when she said that to me, when Vicky said to me, Damn, Beth, you are alcoholic, aren't you? I realized that I looked to her like Diane had looked to me.
Wow. Absolutely. And you give me a lot of epiphanies because I have heard other things that you have out there, and even just speaking in our group, And one thing I wanted to ask you about, I've never had the chance to ask you, is I love when you say, I wish you desperation. I
Mm-hmm.
remember, and I remember first hearing that, and I thought, that is so morbid. Why would she say that? And it took me a good week or two to really like marinate in it and process it, and I realized
Mm-hmm.
that is the gift of desperation. And you were right. Like it wasn't until I was my most desperate that I finally surrendered and gave up whatever control I thought that I had.
Right.
And so
Right.
I I love too that, I think when you spoke a couple times now directly with our group, and then when I seen you in Minnetonka, something that stood out was you highlighted, like, and this is something I say over and over again, so I'm just so glad that you said it too, but like that newcomer is the most important person in the room. I've actually gotten kickback on that when I've said that. Because they're
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you're putting on too much pressure to the newcomer. Like, they don't want, I'm like, no, I don't care. You clicky here, you're talking there, you're sharing whatever pearls you think are there. My attention is to that new person who comes
Mm-hmm.
in and sits on. So when you see a newcomer come in, like, what is your, like, do you have like a go-to, especially if they come up to you? Like, is there anything that you make a point to do? I know in your story it was someone held your hand, made a
Yeah,
point to
oh
grab your
yeah, that
hand.
was that was huge. Yeah, something I learned to do, and I encourage all the women I sponsor to do is, a lot of times there'll be somebody new at a meeting, so somebody else leaps up and grabs a meeting schedule, and they pass it around during the meeting, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
they hand it to the newcomer on their way out for coffee or whatever. I mean, that's kind of an over exaggeration with an eye roll in there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and so what we do is what I will do when that meeting schedule comes around to me is I will take the time to open the meeting schedule and circle a meeting where I go and write my name next to it.
Mm.
And so when they get the schedule, I'll tell them, look, you may not remember, because I don't know about you, but my phone directory when I was drinking was a big pile of napkins with phone numbers written on it, right? Somebody gives you their number, you stick it in your pocket, you get home, you have no idea who they are. And it's kind of like that with when you're brand new and you get all these names at meetings, you don't know who anybody is and you don't know who
Mm-hmm.
gave you their number. And so I will tell them, hey, you may not remember who Beth is, but you will at least know if you go to this meeting, you will see a face that you have seen before. And
Mm.
so I encourage the people I sponsor to do that as well. Take it's just those little things that if we're, being intentional is kind of one of my things that I stress a lot, to be, let's be at least as intentional about our recovery as we were about drinking, right? You
Yeah.
know, like somebody I sponsored who was 20 years sober. I watched her come in late to the meeting because she was always late with her $5 Starbucks and her $300 purse. And the basket went around, and literally she put 2 dimes in the basket. And then we went out. We had like a women's fellowship after where we all went out for pizza on Friday night. And I look over and she's got veal parmesan. So now I just can't take it anymore. So I said, look, I have to ask, right? You came in with a $5 Starbucks. You had no money for the basket, yet you are sitting here with a full Italian dinner. Like,
Mm.
what gives? And she got this sheepish look on her face. She goes, well, I didn't have any cash. I used my debit card for all this. And I didn't have any cash. And I just looked at her. I said, did your drug dealer take debit cards?
Oh, yeah, shit.
Right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like put at
Exactly.
least the effort into staying sober that you put into getting loaded, you know?
Yeah.
Get $20 at the beginning of the week and get it all in ones and put them in your wallet so that
Mm-hmm.
you have money for the basket. One of the first things I did money wise was, I got out of detox on Friday, a 4th of July weekend. Um, and I had a dollar that Friday night. I hadn't even had time to, go to an ATM or not, but I had a ton of money in the bank anyway. But I had $1. And at the time, it was 40 cents for a can of Diet Pepsi at 405 Oak Street, you know. And so I was going to get a Diet Pepsi and put the other 60 cents in the basket. And I just had this passing thought that, because a can of Budweiser at the bar back then was $1, right? And so I'm thinking about getting a Diet Pepsi, and I just thought, if I was drinking, the whole dollar would go across the bar for the beer. So I'm putting the whole dollar in the basket, and I'll drink water out of the fountain. And if I have $2, I'll get a Diet Pepsi. But if I've only got $1, it's going in the basket first. And if I went to 3 meetings that day, every meeting gets $1 because every bar would have gotten $1. And Chuck and I now, we make substantially more money than we did when we were new. I mean, when we started dating, we made $10 an hour between us, right? Now we're both retired. And this is not in any means to just say, this is what I put in. So I'm just saying that, we both put in $5. And if we go to 2 meetings, we put in $5 in both of them. And if we go to a meeting every day, then it's a $35 AA week, right? But to put it in perspective, if we were drinking, the last penny we had would go across the bar. So why would we not prioritize AA the same way?
Absolutely. 100%. Okay. Now we're going to zip through these 9 types of mom guilt. And there's a couple I want to touch on, then I want to get your thoughts on, because definitely what's interesting is when they come up with these articles or, these things you can read through, they're not necessarily geared towards recovery, or alcoholism, but I like to share them with my recovery community to put the recovery take on that, to take it to that deeper level. So here's 9 types of mom guilt. What causes mom guilt? Here's a big one. Comparing yourself to others. You might feel guilt creep in when you see other people doing crafts or activities while your kids are engaged in screen time. It can also happen if you feel like you aren't living, up to the type of parents that or the parent that you want to be. Different parenting styles can be a key factor. So I always say comparison is the thief of joy. And I still, to this day, struggle. When I see the moms, I have 5 kids, when I see the moms, they can do all the fun, quality time with their children. And I never, at the end of the day, I still rest my head at the pillow like, oh, I didn't get enough time with my daughter. Oh, I didn't give enough quality time to my 6-year-old. It's like, but I try not to compare myself, but it's hard. And especially in recovery, especially when we go to the events. And, today, Beth, I felt guilty today because it's Mother's Day. I have my kids back, and I'm so grateful for it. Well, I wanted to do a painting and snack thing event, and I'm the one who did not bring my kids. And they're like, but I had to explain, but I wanted some me time. So it's like I can never win in my own head. So
Right. Well, and there will always be someone who does more. And there will always be someone who does less. I think it hit me, and maybe it's because I, lived a few places early on drinking or whatever, but I just realized, and, I fought a weight problem most of my life, but I realized that, at my skinniest, like 10 pounds underweight, I am a size 12. So I was like, oh, I really did have big bones, right? But now I could stand next to a size 5 and not feel bad because we are just different sizes. Okay. And, growing up in Ohio, you'd be a sun worshiper when it's out. But I'm blonde haired and blue eyed. So it doesn't matter how tan I am. Someone who's got brown eyes and darker complected there will always be somebody tanner than me. There will always be someone taller than me. There will always be no matter how new my car is, 3 weeks from now, somebody will come out with a newer model. And for whatever reason, I had that epiphany pretty early in life, long before I got sober. But it's just that no matter what, I will never have the biggest, the best, the fastest, the newest, because the second it's new and you turn around, there's a newer one. And so for whatever reason, that really helped me stop trying to be the fastest, biggest, best, newest, whatever, because it's fleeting, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't last. And I can't be defined by as one who spent her whole life trying to arrange your perception of me so I could be comfortable, then that's, my identity, my comfort has to come from God. It can't come from stuff, because it will never, it'll be perfect for a second, but then yours will be newer, and she'll be taller, and she'll be thinner, and
Yeah.
whatever. So it's like, as always, our inner sense of peace can't come from outside things.
Absolutely. And where I sit today, where I was in the throes of my alcoholism and drinking, yeah, on the outside, I probably looked great because I always made sure, I was dressed in business casual and the house is clean and all that. But what was really going on inside, I was an ugly person because I hated myself. And looking
Right.
at where I sit today, I'm okay wearing sweatpants and my nails aren't done or whatever, but I know on the inside, and my kids see it too, that like I'm showing up authentic and I'm
Right.
present and I'm real. And I'd rather have that over whatever fancy new
Right.
hairstyles out.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, a couple more and then we're going to get into the last segment, but this one I thought really stood out. Feeling bored. It says you might experience guilt if you feel bored and you want time away from your kids. Lacking adult conversations or engagement in your favorite activities can make you feel like you need more out of life. This feeling is okay, as having a life other than parenting is essential. So what I wrote down is I had this constant feeling in the pit of my stomach, especially through the divorce, and once I really became a single mom, was I felt trapped. I felt trapped, and alcohol was this toxic escape for me. But have you heard of HALT? Are you hungry, angry, lonely, ding ding, or tired?
Right.
So, do you still find that? So, what do you do when you get bored?
Well, I'm who's got time to be bored, right?
Yeah, yeah, true.
Um, yeah, it's boredom, I think, is just kind of I don't want to say it's a state of mind, but it's, I could have every stimulation on earth and be just woefully unhappy, or I could have nothing going on. I'm going to tie it back to, I took when I went back to school, I had to take a management class for my degree, and I was still living in Cincinnati, and the woman who taught it was in personnel at General Electric for years, right? So we had to do this questionnaire on, were these things present in the best job you ever had and the worst job you ever had? And they were things like opportunity for advancement, one-on-one mentorship, benefits, whatever. And so in theory, that the best job you ever had would have many of those, and probably the worst job you ever had didn't, right? So I finished it and I looked at it and I just thought, oh, that can't be right. And so I erased it and I did the whole thing again. And I looked, because it wasn't everything yes, yes, yes down on the best job and no, no, no on the worst job. They were almost identical, just kind of zigzagging back and forth across the page. And so I took it up to her and I said, I'm thinking that this is why personnel directors have such a hard time with alcoholics. And she looked at the page and her eyes bugged out a little, right? Because it's just not a pattern that you would expect to see on this questionnaire. But what I realized as I did it was, and you can hear this confirmed over and over and over and over in meetings, that we could have the best job ever with great pay and opportunities for advancement. And if we're anywhere near the end of our drinking, there is just nothing that's going to make us happy, right? It's never enough. And what have you done for me lately? And you don't understand. And I need this. And the flip side of that is we get sober and we could be working at McDonald's 3 weeks sober, and it's like the best job ever. And we're happier than we've ever been. And it's because, we get to live in this fourth dimension of existence that the book talks about. So we don't respond to the normal kind of three-dimensional things that other people do. We are living in this new dimension where our happiness does not depend on outside things anymore. And it was just, I was probably 2 or 3 years sober when that happened, and it was just really eye opening for me to realize that. And it's like when our daughter was a preteen, and she's just not a student, never has been. She's got a work ethic that I envy. I mean, she's a good worker. She did well in the military, but as far as just book learning and test taking, she's just not a student, never has been. And we tried everything from threatening anything that meant anything to her, right, to promising her a car if she would just get a couple of B's, right? So we tried everything from emptying her room of everything that meant anything to her, all the way to promising her the world. And none of it worked. And I remember looking at Chuck and just saying, it's spiritual. Like, she's just not going to do it till she wants to. Normal stimulus just does not apply here. And that's, I think, is the same for us too. So it doesn't, all that other stuff no longer matters. It doesn't motivate us anymore. And that's why people can't figure us out.
Absolutely. And I think, okay, we're going to go into the memes, but I did post the link for the full article if anybody wants to read on that. And what I always like to repeat is that, recovery didn't open the gates of heaven and let me in. Recovery opened the gates of hell and let me out.
Right.
And so
That's
just
right.
this gratitude for what until I sank and got to those dark, really low levels, until I was in those depths, I feel like that's almost, for me, anyone in recovery, because we've understood that, it puts us on this other level of life that is so much more fulfilling.
Right. And that's what Bill calls, that fourth dimension of existence.
Okay, are you ready for my favorite segment? And we could
I'm
just whip
ready.
through them. I think I only have 6 or 7. I didn't. Beth, I feel bad for my first show's guests. I used to have like 15 of them. I realized, okay, I don't need to post every single meme that I found entertaining. Okay. So I'm going to actually not see the comments for a minute, but anyone wanting to ask questions, keep doing that. I can look at it when we're through these, but I'm going to go ahead and put up the first meme. And just to keep in mind, they are a variety. It could be funny, it could be inspirational, it could be some that are more slap in the face, but just give me your take on it, Beth. Totally be whatever you think. I've had some ones where they're just like, I don't see why this is not funny at all, so I won't be
Yeah.
offended. Ready?
Okay. And where am I going to see it?
It's gonna pop right on the screen. Gotta do the sound effects.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we got, do you want to describe it? Looks like we got The Rock. Everybody knows who he
Right.
is. Famous guy.
Screenshots I'll never use. Yep.
He's carrying this giant, and he's strong, but he's carrying this giant bag. And so The Rock represents my phone. And this big ass bag he's carrying around says, screenshots I'll never use.
Right.
Do you find that, are you a screenshotter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's hilarious. And I do try to at least go back through and like weed them all out now every now and then. And I still have 4 times as many as I thought I did. So.
Yes, and some I'm just like, why did I even screenshot that? I don't know.
Right.
Okay, this next one is just words, if you don't mind reading them.
I'll stop swearing in front of my kids as soon as they stop fighting and acting like assholes. So never is the answer. Never. Yeah.
This is just, it's true. And I actually don't cuss a lot around my kiddos, but if they start slipping, they know mom's needing some space.
Right. Right. Although we do, we try to lead by example. So I did, one thing I found with my kids, and it's a super like thin line between the two, but it makes a difference, is there's a difference between saying you're an asshole and you're acting like an asshole. right?
Mm-hmm.
Or in my case, jerk, stop. Uh, and my son was super sensitive to that stuff. If I said you're being a jerk, he would get really upset. But if I'd say you're acting like a jerk, it's kind of like that being able to separate the disease from the person. Same thing. I can say
Yeah.
you're acting like this versus you are this. And they
Yes.
hear that stuff. They hear it, and it makes a difference.
Oh, and especially in the heat of the moment, especially when you're talking teenagers and hormones, I
Mhm.
literally will have to pause and back up and say, "No, I did not call you that, but I did say you were acting like that." Then I
Right.
know it's like, okay, this is a pause on this conversation because he's very heated right now. Okay.
Right.
Oh, this one's from Word Porn. And it says, do you mind reading it?
When you're full of love, it confuses people who are full of shit. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty
Very
good.
much
Keep them
so.
guessing.
Yeah, I just can't believe, but totally I'm a different person. There's so many people that don't even remember me or recognize me because my
Mhm.
energy and my light is so positive that it's hard to believe. But like we talked about earlier, when I share my stuffs, they're like, "Oh
Mhm.
yeah, okay, you are one of us." Okay, this is a side by side. Vin Diesel's on one side looking
Yeah.
handsome, and then you got Fester Adams on the other side. And what
Mhm.
does Vin Diesel's side look say?
Right. Well, you know what happened? I called my mom always had this, we called it her judgy face, grandma's judgy face, right? So
Mm-hmm.
my mom died in 2017, but sometime in the last couple of years, if you ever been just out shopping or something, and you look up and you catch yourself by surprise, like in a window reflection,
Uh-huh.
right? All of a sudden
Yes.
you come face to face with yourself. And I called my daughter and I said, "You know that judgy face grandma always had?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "It wasn't a judgy face, it was a tired face." Because my mom's judgy face was looking right back at me and I was judging nothing. I was just tired. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh my
Yeah.
God, all this time I've judged her for looking judgy when she probably was just tired.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What's the other phrase? The resting bee face? you
Uh-huh.
know and there's so many moments when I am tired, or I'm in my own
Mm-hmm.
world, in my own head, and somebody smiled and I didn't catch it in time to smile back
Mm-hmm.
at them, and I'm like, oh man. I probably just think I'm in bad
Right.
mood.
Now they're
But yeah,
all
so
talking bad about me.
yeah, like anyone cares. Yeah. But yeah, so
Right.
Vid's side is what I look like in my mind, and that's when I'm having a great day. And
Mm-hmm.
the Fester side said what I look like in Target self checkout. Have you been to Target lately?
I don't shop at Target.
Okay, I don't often, but when I do, and it's like this high tech fancy camera right in your face. Oh, Beth, I
Mm,
thought I was looking fine, just fine. I was in a great mood the other day, and it was glaring my wrinkles. Like,
yeah.
oh, jeez. Okay, reality check
Yeah.
is
Well,
good.
that's
Maybe I
like the
should
old
comb my hair.
selfie camera, same thing. It's like, oh, that can't be right.
Uh huh. Yeah. Don't get me started on that. Okay, this next one. You want to read that one?
My toxic trait is saying I really got to clean this car out every day and then we'll never clean the car out. That's a bad
That's
thing.
just that's just me. This was funny to me because, like, amongst all the other things I do and being in the cars, I'm like, oh, I should clean this out. And somehow it just never seems to
Mhm.
happen.
Right.
Okay. This one's I thought was good, deeper. Unpopular fact, it says, there is still grief involved with letting a toxic person go.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, this
Sure.
hit me
And another thing
because,
I've heard about grief is uh, uh, like you can let the waves wash over you now, or the undertow can kick your ass later. I mean, I counted the
mm,
days until my divorce was final from the husband number one, and then the day it was final, I sat and
mm-hmm,
cried, and nobody was more surprised than me. But ultimately, it still was the death of a
right.
dream. I mean, most of us don't know. I have sponsored one who would say different, but for the most part, we don't get married going, oh, well, if it doesn't work, I can always get divorced. I mean, there is a dream of happily ever after under there somewhere. And when these happen, there's still this grieving involved in kind of the death of a dream. So it's perfectly
Yes.
normal. There's nothing wrong with you if you're, you know,
You
grieving
nailed it.
something that was killing you. I mean, we grieve over alcohol. It was killing us, but we still miss it.
Yes, I used to call it my best friend, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
It was always there for me until it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, yeah, this is just I'm getting to that age, Beth, where I'd just rather be in bed. So it says, "What you doing tonight?" First of all, I'm already in bed.
Mm-hmm.
I get the
That's right.
text, and it's probably only 9 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night.
Mhm.
Oh, what are you doing? I'm in my pajamas. What are you doing? I'm not
Yeah.
going
Well,
out.
you've probably seen the meme that says, "You're still a rock star." I whisper to myself as I go to bed at 8:45.
Yes. Yep, definitely. Okay. I love Kermit. So this is I've seen this picture popular. It's the good positive Kermit, regular Kermit looking at
Mm-hmm.
Kermit in a dark cape, and it says, "Me, I think I want to stay single. Enter me like you have a choice."
Yeah.
That's I don't know. I vibe with that one. Cuz I go
Yeah,
around sharing
but
my
that
story,
one we
you
can
know.
we can take gratitude, and we don't have to live like that anymore because that's the kind of stuff that we used to say to ourselves all the time. You
Yeah.
know, now we can just go like child of God. And by the way, if there's someone that you're struggling with, this is a powerful prayer. It works. I tell people it worked on my mother. Okay, you take
Mhm.
that person and say, God, when I look at whoever that is, and sometimes it's myself. I have prayed it in the mirror. God, when I look in the mirror, let me see who you see, not who I think I am.
Mm.
God, when I look at my mother, let me see who you see, not who I think she is.
Yeah.
Super powerful prayer.
Yes. Well, and my male sponsor, Wally P, had me because I was still struggling with one of my really inventory, what somebody on my list, and he had me for 2 weeks. It's in the big book. Two
Mm-hmm.
weeks. Say a prayer and mean it as much as I can. To wish them well, to wish them they're sick. They might not be sick with alcoholism, but they're definitely
Mm-hmm.
sick in different capacities. And so I didn't really think it was going to work, but he told me to do it, so I did it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding. After about a week, I really started to feel like I meant it. And by the end of
Mm-hmm.
the 2 weeks, I'm like, I felt like I could really let that go, and kind of like what you were just saying is let go of this hope or idea of what I want the relationship to be or what I wanted it to be, and just
Mm-hmm.
accept it as it is. Okay, final meme. Here we go. Thank you for being a good sport. I
Mm-hmm.
just like this mystical picture. It's just like a crystal ball, and there's a wolf and a
Right.
kid, and it says, "Can you read it?"
Uh-huh. To remember who you are, you need to forget what they told you to be. So yeah. And
Mm.
that's like, like everything else. My favorite thing is like, who I am as child of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our kids are also children of God. God does not have grandchildren.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna take a look at the comments and see if anybody. And one thing that you, I think, helped me, because basically your story allowed me to accept and be okay with the fact that I was okay with, you know, not being what quote unquote perfect moms are,
Mm-hmm.
and needing to be an adult and have that time where, you know, I, needed to be away from them. And it was always so judgy from people
Mm-hmm.
if I even expressed anything like that, especially in
Yeah.
recovery.
Yeah. Well, and I'm grateful because even when I was pregnant with my son, I didn't like my first OB, and I ended up changing doctors, and he said the 24/7 mom is the first one to the psych ward. He said
Mm.
people who tell you they love their children 20 that they just 24 hours a day, it's all they want to do. He said they're lying. Nobody likes their kids all the time. We love them, but we don't like them all the time. And he said, you have got to 1 hour a day, you have someone come sit with that baby so you can take a shower or take a nap. And once a week, you have someone 2 or 3 hours a day so you can leave the building. Because the other thing is, if they only ever see you, you can't leave the room without them screaming. And they have got to be socialized to other people. But I've been forever grateful for him who said, and he wasn't in AA, I wasn't in AA, he just was a good young doctor. And he just said, the 24-hour a day mommy is the first one to the psych ward.
Yeah. Well, it's like he gave you that permission too to
Mm-hmm.
just.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
So,
also a
okay.
great book now for mothers of like preteens. I think it's been out for years. It should be required reading. The name of the book is Get Out of My Life, but first can you drive me and Cheryl to the mall?
Oh my gosh. I like that
Fabulous
title.
book. Yeah,
Yes.
it's you can get it on Amazon. It's, $15. I mean, my daughter's 39. I read it when she was 11. But it's just a really good book about how they separate from us and they're supposed to, and what to look for. So it's kind of like when we read the big book and go, oh my God, that's us. We can read this. And like a lot of what, we see alcoholism under every rock with our kids. And it turns out a lot of what we're looking at is just adolescent behavior. So good book.
Oh my
So,
gosh. I think I think it's not a coincidence that we had this conversation because Beth literally, my daughter's 12 and
hmm
it's been a complete 180. She's now, a young lady officially, and it's like I did not expect the slap in the face too. She wants nothing to do with
right.
me. She's saying all the hurtful
hmm
things, and I've nobody has said what you just said to me. Like I'm gonna go get this book because I feel like yes, it's natural for her to want to be
hmm
rebellious or whatever, but I didn't expect it at this capacity. And I don't know what to do. It's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah, it's a great book. It should be required reading for all parents. So
Wonderful.
well, I'm glad
Okay.
that we got to visit. We seeing any of you
Yes.
guys at Girl Stock?
Um, I'm not myself. I'm just kind of budgeting, but I do think a couple of our bad moms are.
Good,
So I'll
good.
have
Well,
them
tell
hit
them
you
to
up.
find me. I'll be there.
Beth H, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. Happy Mother's Day,
Oh,
of
thanks,
course.
Bridge, and thanks for all you do to help carry the message. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
All
bye.
right, bye bye.
And thank you, listeners. I hope you all have a great week. And I will check in with you next week. And I'm going to get to that famous end of the show music, returning home. So I'm going to go home. And man, Cloud9. Good night, everybody.